one of the larger questions or comments that was made is we don't have human trafficking around here. It's a downstate issue. Well, that's not true. It is a bigger issue downstate, but just recently and a few years ago, we have prosecuted human trafficking criminals. And it's a larger issue than what you realize. And I've had the opportunity in the transportation industry to attend national conferences where they put a focus in on this issue. It is amazing to me what our young women have gone through that have been brought into human trafficking. One of the things that stuck out to me that I learned is that they prey on 2 women at a time, 2 young women. Because if they can get both the young women, they can use one against the other. They can say to the one, I am going to beat your friend if you don't do what I ask you to. This is what we're dealing with. These people, these young women, are afraid to not go along because in addition to that, they will threaten to go kill their family members. And that leads me into who we have that's going to be introducing our Attorney General, Carla Anderson, who is a past president of Zonta in Mountain-Kingsford area, has attended workshops with Zonta. She has attended our conventions district, and then also a national convention that was in Napa, Florida. She learned about this issue. She had an opportunity to meet our Attorney General and get to know his passion on this topic. And so it's the most appropriate thing at this time to ask Carla to come up and have the honor of introducing him.
On behalf of Zonta and also the Board of Directors of Caring House, I want to tell you how thrilled I am to have our guest here today, and I'd like to tell you just a couple of things about our guest of honor. He has served as the United States Congressman, Director of the Michigan Department of Agriculture, a Michigan State Senator, and as a judge of the Michigan Court of Appeals, making him the only Attorney General in Michigan history to have served in the executive, the legislative, and the judicial branches of state government. Bill Schuette's many accomplishments include protecting equal treatment in admissions to our state's public universities, defending the pensions of Michigan's police and firefighters during Detroit's historic bankruptcy, and leading multi-state effort to protect the Great Lakes from invasive species. He and his wife Cynthia also created the Michigan Harvest Gathering, which is a food and fund drive to benefit Michigan food banks. And this organization has raised more than $10 million and has also collected nearly 10 million pounds of food. Now, I met Mr. Schuette at a Republican leadership conference on Mackinac Island during his first bid for Attorney General. And that meeting was really memorable to me for 3 reasons. Number one, he poured me coffee at a breakfast event. And he had the most delightful campaign slogan ever, Bill Schuette, on duty. But the most significant reason was that was the first time I had ever heard anyone use the term human trafficking in reference to the state of Michigan. I thought this was something that happened overseas. And I didn't know that it was something local and hit this close to home. So that's why I am very thrilled that he's here today to tell us more about it. Since being elected in 2010, Attorney General Schuette has been a powerful voice for victims of exploitation. He engineered a plan to fund the testing of thousands of long-abandoned DNA evidence boxes, bringing justice for the victims of sexual assault. And he also formed the Michigan Commission on Human Trafficking, bringing this often misunderstood subject to light. And he's here right now to tell us some more about his subject that gets very close to home. So without further ado, I'm honored to introduce a tireless advocate for the people of Michigan and a personal hero of mine, Attorney General Bill Schuette.
Well, thank you, Carl. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to be here. My name is Bill Schuette. I'm your on-duty Attorney General, I guess, as Carl said. My goodness, thanks for the attaboy. I appreciate it. I'm delighted to be here. Lynn Reed, thanks so much. Zonta friends and guests, and my buddy Aaron Harper. No more retiring. Okay, you're in the seat for a long, good long. Keeping your vegetables. You're the voice of Frog Radio for a long time, and this is a big day for Bill Schuette. I'm just thrilled to be here in the Upper Peninsula. Get your map out. Okay, this is Michigan, right? So my wife and I live in right here in Midland, and things are going pretty well for us now that the hot water tank is fixed. Just when I'm getting ready to fly up here last night or this morning. The hot water tank breaks. I have the plumber come, and I think her job today getting the hot water tank fixed is much harder than me bopping around the UP. But anyway, I'm thrilled to be here because earlier I was in Sault Ste. Marie, and there spoke to some children at an elementary school. Being here in Iron Mountain, I so much appreciate it, and then going to Marquette, and then later on the way to Mackinac Island. So for me, this is a great big day, and thank you so much for being here. I'm thrilled and delighted to be here to talk about an issue that's very, very important to me and everybody here, and that is about human trafficking. And I'm grateful that you would come here so we can have this discussion and dialogue. I'll try to get right to it as best I can. I do want to thank the members of law enforcement who are here today, my partners in the Michigan State Police, and also local law enforcement, sheriff, and police officers. I'm glad that we're here together because this is an approach we have to take together, working together to combat human trafficking and making sure on a host of law enforcement issues that our schools are places of learning, not violence, where our communities are safe and our neighborhoods are secure. And I so much appreciate the leadership and the work of folks in law enforcement here today. I'm very complimented that you would come. So thank you very, very much. I'm not sure what your expectation might be today. In my line of work, sometimes expectations don't match up. I remember when I was first judge on the Michigan Court of Appeals, and I just was elected to that post, and it was unusual for me to put on the robe, the black robe, and people would call me, judge this, judge that, your honor this, your honor that, and it just took me a while to get used to it. It's kind of like when you buy a new pair of running shoes, you got to put some miles on them before they conform to your feet, right? Or if you're buying a new suit off the rack, you might need to get it adjusted here or there. And so finally, after 6 weeks on the job, as a judge on the Michigan Court of Appeals, I called somebody on the phone, and he was kind of a big shot in the state. The trick is to try to get through the personal assistant or the office professional or the secretary. And sometimes that can be a grueling task. You can find some folks that are rough on you, and you can find some folks that are pleasant and easy. So I tried it out, and I said, well, this is Judge Schuette calling for so-and-so. And my call went through like greased light, and I said to myself, I think I like this gig. This is going to work. And this guy got on the phone in kind of a breathless tone and said, hello, and I said, this is Bill Schuette, and the inflection in his voice went out like when you pop a balloon. And he goes, oh, I thought it was Judge Judy calling. So if you're looking for Judge Judy, you got Schuette here today. Then I'll give my best about this issue of human trafficking. And again, the final geography course. My wife and I live in Midland, born and raised. We went to the same bus stop, grade school, junior high, high school, and it took me 20 years to convince her to marry me. She went into broadcasting She was an accomplished professional in her own right, and I went into public service, and it wasn't until 20 years later, after repeated efforts on my part to ask her out, she finally gave in. So if you ever question my tenacity, talk to my wife, she'll confirm it. We've now been married, in March we celebrated our 25th wedding anniversary, so that was big news for me. It was good news. And we have a daughter who lives in New York City. She is 23 years old. And some the other day said, "Schuette, this is so great. You get one of your children off the payroll." And I said, "When your daughter lives in New York City, she's not off the payroll." I guarantee you that. We have a son who's will be 21 this summer, and he's a junior in college, and he'll be working in the nation's capital. He goes to school there as well. And then my wife is the one who helps me navigate the 83 counties of Michigan. And sometimes, on the windshield, but sometimes on the book. And she helps me make sure that things are right and peaceful at home, and I'm very blessed that way. And that's the Schuette family update and where we are. But on to a serious subject, and that's why we're all here. It's about this issue of human trafficking. And for me, there are people who knew far more about human trafficking than when I first learned about it. It was when I was first running for the privilege to serve as Attorney General. And I would go and meet with people. And those of you who run for office or know people who do, part of it is trying to be a good listener and learn. And I learned that in Michigan, that our laws we were down at the bottom. We were way back, and we needed to do better. And I learned about this issue of human trafficking. And then after had the privilege to take my oath of office as Attorney General, I made a decision that we needed to, indeed we would do better. We would rise up and have stronger, more victim-oriented, victim-centered laws. And I formed a Michigan Commission on Human Trafficking. And I also worked with attorneys general across America on this issue of human trafficking, and learned a lot and tried to incorporate some of that here in Michigan. And we put together a group of folks. There was a representative from the Michigan State Police, for example, a great guy named Ed Price, and we had prosecutors, we had defense attorneys, we had anti-trafficking activists, and we had sheriffs, we had Democrats and Republicans. Yep, things that can happen in this world in which everyone sometimes thinks you can't get anything done in Lansing or Washington because people are fighting and there's too much philosophical differences between the left and the right. Well, we joined hands and built a bridge, so to speak, and built a bridge to combat human trafficking. We came out with a 63-page report, a list of recommendations on what we could do to combat human trafficking. And we talked about the need for public awareness. And this is perfect. Carla, this is absolutely perfect. And Lynn, this is just perfect, where we're having a discussion so we can educate and learn and raise awareness about the significance of human trafficking. We had a second group that talked about training, so that the experts in law enforcement could train others in the law enforcement community on how to spot human trafficking maybe in an event or a traffic stop or something like that. So we could help train people in a variety of different ways on how you might notice or think, trigger an interest that someone might be a victim of human trafficking. We had a third group that was on legislative recommendations. How can we have more protection for the victims of human trafficking, and also strengthen the laws against the thugs and these creeps who do this? We had another group on data collection, try to get your arms around how big this issue is. And then we had a final group or subgroup on victim assistance, how to help the women. I want to talk about that in a second. So we put these 5 groups together, and we worked in tandem and in concert. And now we have a commission on human trafficking that is housed within the Department of Attorney General, and will be there for a good long time. Even after Bill Schuette is no longer Attorney General, it'll still be in a place that is devoted towards combating human trafficking. And The whole issue here is that you see young women, and it's primarily young women, through fraud or force or coercion, get roped into a dark and shadowy world where maybe this person comes from a fractured family, or maybe it's a wayward soul, what have you. We're looking for connection and relationship, which is really the core of whenever there's a problem. Usually there's an absence of relationship, right? An absence of love, absence of being connected in a real stable, substantive way. And maybe it's, you see an ad on, these terrible websites called Backpage and others like that. Or maybe there's the promise of a job, of employment, but it's a fraud, it could be a hoax, it's a pretense, and once this person goes someplace, maybe a big city, then you end up being roped in this whole life where you get battered, assaulted, and traded. It's like merchandise in the sex slave market. And as a husband, as a father, as a parent, as Attorney General, as citizen, no matter what you might be, it turns your stomach. And it caused me to make sure that we made sure that our laws would be strengthened. We put together a victim-centered approach where now in the state of Michigan, because we passed a law, young women who are forced to have sex against their will are treated as victims, not criminals. That is a major turn of events in the state of Michigan, ladies and gentlemen. That's a big deal. Just before the presumption it was there as mere prostitutes, so to speak. Now the presumption is these are victims. They're forced to have sex against their will, and also what we did is we strengthened the punishment on the traffickers and the Johns, who wage was $32 billion industry globally, second largest crime effort in the world. And we made great strides. And we have a unit within the Department of Attorney General, a human trafficking unit that is with a group of folks that work with prosecutors across the state of Michigan. And it's we've had 12 convictions now. And we have been working with state police, working with local prosecutors, and some of these tales are gruesome. As a matter of fact, one of the guys' names was Gruesome, and that was his street name, where he would assault and traffic and sell young women on the sex slave market. We put him behind bars from 30 to 40 years, but the point is not just the prosecution, and that's important. The point is not just making sure we have a human trafficking unit that combats it and sends a message out there that we're not going to tolerate this in the state of Michigan. But the other important ingredient is we can prosecute, we can sentence, and we can put these thugs behind bars. But then, what is the real element here? What are we missing? And the point there is, what about the young woman? And the key thing is, you don't want this young woman going back out on the street, because then you accomplish nothing in terms of that person's life. And there are some great organizations across Michigan that work on victim assistance. It can be in Oakland County, there's a group called Common Ground, Vista Maria, in southeastern Michigan, an organization called the Manasseh Project in Grand Rapids, where they try to provide, it's kind of like I'm certainly in Kingsford and Iron Mountain, there are some domestic violence safe houses, right? Safe havens. We have that in Midland, we have that in places across the state. And I think we'll see these victim assistance efforts kind of a safe haven to provide security, places of hope, to get women back on their feet. Maybe it's GED skills, maybe it's life skills, what have you, so that when someone is provided some assistance, that it's not a revolving door where that person goes right back out on the street. And what would they do? They'd probably get roped in a second time. But the victim assistance element is really important here. And I think in certain communities, depending on your population, you'll see places like that where you'll have private, public, nonprofit partnerships to provide a safe haven for victims of human trafficking just to get back on their feet. So I'm really encouraged by that. The comment that Carla talked about and Lynn talked about is, does human trafficking really happen here in the Great Lakes State and in Michigan? And the answer is yes. And the answer is yes. And folks in law enforcement know this, and others who really honed in on this. And I have to tell you, when you meet a victim of human trafficking, it changes you. There was a woman who was at the Manassas Project in Grand Rapids, and we never used her name, but she was from the middle part of the state and came from a rough life and a rough family, and she was ended up being a runaway, and she found some other girls in a town in the middle part of the state that you would not think that would happen, right? And then there was some guy who noticed them and enticed these two young ladies, the promise of a job, right? Some connectedness, hey, that type of thing. And then she got caught up in this incredibly tough, wicked, brutal world of human trafficking. And fortunately, she got freed from it. But when you talk with her and you hear her story of how she was victimized and how she was assaulted, and day after day, multiple times of brutality within the course of the day, you realize this is not just some statistic. It's not just some paper that you read, a blue ribbon report or something like that, but rather it's a person. This could be anybody's daughter. My daughter, your daughter of someone we know in Dickinson County. It could be any place in the UP, any place in the state of Michigan. So the fact is, it does happen. And it really sensitized me to the significance of what this cause is, what Carla so nicely described and so captured the essence of what we're trying to do. And the other episode that really kind of impacted me is that a year ago, I was at a human trafficking conference in southeastern Michigan, and they had a number of there was kind of a panel, everyone in different oars in the water, this human trafficking issue spoke, and then there was an open session, kind of like this, where people can ask questions and people try to answer them. There's a woman in the back of the room who raised her hand and said, and told the story that she had been assaulted and trafficked and tried to get help, and no one had helped her. No one had done anything. And I said, well, when we're done here, let me take a moment and let's talk with you to see what we could do. So we met with her and looked at the case. And then 6 weeks later, I called her on the phone. And I called her on the phone and said, hey, I just want you to know that this guy who assaulted you, we filed charges and are prosecuting you. And the phone, well, it was as if the phone went dead. Nothing stayed. And then she started sobbing on the phone. And this was just tears of relief that finally, after all this time, something had started so she gets some justice. And that's why this is such a big issue. Because that could have been anyone. Could have been someone you know, someone I know, but it's part of this family we call Michigan. And that's why having you all come here today is really pretty incredible. And I appreciate the fact that you would be here. We're going to have a discussion, dialogue, judges, law enforcement, and commissioners, and all of you play a role. Everyone has something to do in this, in this whole effort. And I don't want to talk anymore. My wife said, make sure they ask you back. my mother would used to say, Bill, you're judged by the company you keep, and Bill, you're judged by those of your friends. And I've got a lot of friends in this room, and I'm really proud to be in your company. Thank you very, very much. I appreciate it. Thank you. Question is, when someone gets trafficked and part of this human trafficking ring, what happens? Where do they go? Does it go to a big city? Do they stay in Michigan? Both. The answer is both. Sometimes you'll see at big activities. It could be a Super Bowl or a big auto show or a big convention that has some notoriety, where there's some of these trafficking groups will take the women from area to area, could be state to state. So it can happen that way, or it occurs just for their own evil purposes in an area. Could be anywhere. I mean, for example, there was I work with prosecutors across the state of Michigan, all 83 counties, and every prosecutor is sworn to doing what? Fighting crime and combating crime. Sadly enough, there was a prosecutor in Michigan's capital city in Lansing, in Ingham County, who got caught up in a human trafficking ring. And we filed charges against him, and there were these allegations, I think, are solid, substantial, and will stand up in court. But it can happen any place. Lansing isn't that far away from place X. So it can happen in the state, sometimes they move about the country. So that's what happens. Please, yes, sir.
How many of these cases are isolated incidents or part of a larger group of perhaps organized activities?
Question is, how are these events connected? Are they separate? Are they part of organized activities? You know, it's a little bit of both. Quite honestly, we work with folks in law enforcement who get leads, tips, information, and sometimes it appears isolated. As you go farther, then more facts unfold, and it's part of a larger ring and all of that. So it varies, quite frankly. There's no one necessary pattern to it. Good question. Yes, ma'am. Commissioner.
Is there anything in the state budget that would allow for funding for studies or services provided for the victims?
Yeah, great question. How much is there funding in the state budget for human trafficking activities? You know, the budget issues are always, there's activity going in Lansing today about Detroit Public Schools, for example, that budget issue, and there'll be lots of other budget issues are working that way through the legislative system right now. The focus in Lansing has been more on the issue of providing assistance to victims in terms of the presumption that they are now treated as victims of crime and not criminals, which that's almost as if you alter the rotation of the axis on the earth, that you moved in a different way. And we've also worked on expungement of criminal records for young victims of human trafficking. And that's been part of what's been done. In terms of dollars and cents resources, there's never enough to go around. This is somewhat similar to it, and on a public awareness issue. It took a bit for people to learn the perils of drunk driving. And, the Mothers Against Driving and Students Against Drunk Driving, that raised the level of consciousness. Same thing with respect to domestic violence and spousal abuse. That sometimes it wouldn't be talked about because, that's it's a dirty, naughty topic. But now we do talk about it. And there are, safe havens and shelter houses and places for those of victim domestic violence to go for safety. And that's what we're doing with this issue of human trafficking. And I think in the end, there's not enough federal money, there's not enough state money. Sometimes we do be able to provide grants for law enforcement so that they can focus in and help in a tandem way in terms of trying to combat it. I think you'll see communities and nonprofits kind of band together to try to provide housing and victim assistance and things like that. That's where I think it'll probably go.
I think at this time, I need to have you.
Can we get one last question, then, young
Is there
lady?
any age that's triggered or that stands out to you,
Say that again, any
any
age. Is there any age that sticks out in terms of the young women? No, not particularly. But these are young ladies, and then it could be anywhere between 13 and 17, 18, 19. Just breaks your heart when you see that. Yeah, it really, really does. And, well, listen, I know you have a lot to do. Thank you for letting me be in your company. This is a big deal for me. Thanks.